Hello, I'm Dan Cosley, and this is Sor Mind. In this episode, we're going to look at Opus 44, number 5. This study is a little bit more arpeggio-based, and so there are moments where we get non-chord tones, but there are passages that are constructed exclusively from arpeggios. This is in 3/8 time. It has a little more of a waltz-like feel. Sor establishes the tonic chord in the first two bars like this. And then the 5 chord with a similar design. So what's happening? We start with just the good old C major chord that all of us know, and we walk down. And then using maybe that sequential preparation of the left hand that we talked about, we get a G7 chord in first inversion, right? And then we have kind of the retrograde or the opposite motion. We come up the C chord, and in measure 6, I have a sense that that is F major or D minor, and that the E, whichever we call that harmony, the E is a non-chord tone. So in bar 7, we have a G kind of harmony, and that last note in bar 7 is a passing note, and then down a G major arpeggio in measure 8. And back to the main thematic thing in measure 9. Now, all of that measure 9 is C major and 10. Measures 11 and 12 are G7 in first inversion. If I spell it from the bottom, B, G, D, F. This is 3, root, 5, flat 7. And then in measure 13, he comes up C major again. In measure 14, I will call this D minor over F. You could think of this harmony like this: F, A, D, F. So we have a D minor in first inversion with a doubled flat third, has 2 flat thirds, has flat 3, 5, root, and flat 3. You know, if you know your basic open position chords, you can sort of extrapolate, you can reason from those chords to learn a lot about harmony on the guitar if you just do simple things. Like, for example, people who don't have a lot of experience with classical guitar, they might still know this chord for D minor, right? I'm going to spell it: root, 5, root, flat 3, D, A, D, F. But what Sor is doing is he's playing, instead of 2 Ds, 2 roots, he's taking that open D string up to an F. And that's a different kind of color. And it sits well here because the F in the bass there leads us up to the root of the 5 chord in measures 7 and 8, right? So listen to the bass, just the bass voice from measure 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, measure 9. So here's measure 9, C major. Measure 14. So measure 14 is D minor over F, and the E is a passing note to the flat third, which the flat third then becomes the flat 7 of G7 measure 15, it's a G7 harmony. There's one non-chord tone. Can you spot it? What is G7? We have G, B, D, F. I could play it like this. G, B, D, F. The C in that little line is just a passing note between the third and the fifth, but it gives a sense of this. That's hard to play. So here's G7, root, third, fifth, flat 7, and this is difficult to play, but take a listen. If I suspend that third to a fourth, it gives that little sense of dissonance. So there's something like that implied in that simple little line in measure 15. We've got. Now, Sor rests, I think, very carefully. He didn't, waste the time to take the feather quill and write those extra symbols unless he really wanted that. What happens if we respect that? Here's, let's take a measure 14. Actually, let's go from 13. I'll end that phrase, and on the second beat of measure 16, I'll really dampen everything. Now, if you dampen with this part of the right hand, it works nicely, but it might be hard to get back in time for the pickup note. So, I'm sure a lot of you do this, but what I'll do sometimes is I'll put my hand in what I call fourth position. So I've got my thumb, index, middle ring on the top 4 strings. And then if you kind of lay your thumb back on the side, you can get the other 2 bass strings so that they're not ringing sympathetically. And then what that does is you get the dampening effect, but you're set up to play that pickup note G at the end of bar 16. So here's measure 15. And I'm set up. Now in measure 17, he's starting this kind of new section on the dominant. And again, he's in first inversion, back to the C chord. So what is that? We have G major and C major. Play them as block chords, and you see that the spacing is what we call the spread triad. We've got the third, root, fifth, and then we've got the root, fifth, third. So if you think about this harmony, it's going through the circle of fourths or the circle of fifths in the other direction, counterclockwise. It's resolving up a fourth. And when that happens with triads, there's going to be a note that is retained. And that retention of the common tone between the triads is really one of the important principles in voice leading. And so in this case, take a listen. The third, root, fifth of G major becomes the root, fifth, third of C major. So from G to C is a fourth. It's going up a fourth. But the note G stays in the same place. It stays in the middle here in this case. If you've taken any music theory courses, you know that the rules of voice leading and part writing are complicated and really involved. But one good principle is if you're leading things through the circle of fourths and you're retaining common tones, you're already respecting a lot of the rules. It just works out that you won't have a lot of, especially in this kind of 3-part harmony, you won't have a lot of parallel fifths or octaves or anything, and you'll have a smooth transition of harmony. So now this is a 5 chord. measure 19, we have just one non-chord tone if we're thinking G7. G7 over D, right? Second inversion, G7. Do you know where the non-chord tone is? Remember, G, B, D, F are the chord tones. So it's the note E. The note E on beat 2 is a non-chord tone. It's we could call it like a lower neighbor to the flat 7 F of G7. Okay, so let's label it simply. Bar 19, G7 over D. That's the harmony. And we have this little slur thing, which is tricky. You know, in this study, because it's a little more arpeggiated kind of texture, I'm letting things overlap a little bit more than I would do in a study like number 4, Opus 44, number 4, where the voices are more melodic in a way. I think it's something that we can argue about in the comments section maybe. Let me know what you think. But in this study, you know, for example, in measure 20, maybe I'm not going to be as meticulous about, you know, dampening. Maybe I should be though. Measure 20 is C major with a doubled third, really. If we voice it, if we stack the voicing, it's E, G, C, E. Then we're back in measure 21 to our G chord in first inversion. We'll go to the C with a little different design that he's going to develop. Right, so C major, but he does that kind of design on the next chord in measure 23, which is our D7 coming back. What is that chord? What is D7 doing in the key of C? It is resolving to a G chord. It's a 5 of 5. We almost feel like we're home, but yet we feel like we want resolution. Measure 25, 26. These are the same as 17 and 18. So measure 25 is G major. Measure 26 is C major. Here we have a variation on that same kind of stuff. Measure 27, like measure 19, is G7. But there's more bass activity. Let's dampen that. Bass line from 27 to 28. Take a listen. Re, sol, fa, mi. Make it melodic. Re, sol, fa, mi. Re, sol, fa, mi. You know, it's important to be able to play one voice and sing the other. It's challenging. Let's see if I can do it. If I sing the bass line, re, sol, fa, mi, but I play the upper voice at measure 27. Re, sol, fa, mi. And then listen to it. Sorry, listen to this. 29, G major. 30 is C major. I'll play that properly. 29, 30, C major. Then D7. Now what's beautiful is the half step resolution. So the flat 7 of a dominant chord often, almost always, not always I guess, very often resolves downward to the third of the next harmony. So what is the flat 7 of D7? We have D, F sharp, A, C. C is the flat 7. and it resolves to the inner voice in measure 32, which is the third of the G harmony. So let's listen to measure 31 going to 32. One more time. You know, I'm going to show you something that I've only heard one guitarist talk about this ever. I heard David Russell talk about this in a master class once. I had been doing it for a long time, but I felt like it was somehow wrong because it's never in books. If you look at all the different, educational materials, etude collections and things, you look at the standardized fingerings for a chord like the chord in measure 32, you'd almost always see either PIM or you'd see IMA for that chord. But I realized a while ago that if I play PAM on a chord like this, I can control the color a little better. I can make it darker more easily than if I play PIM. Take a listen. Here's PMA. Here's PIM. It's just the natural kind of angle of the fingers and the path that they follow. When you play PMA, you slice the string a little bit more and you get a warmer sound with more of the fundamental. And when you play PIM, you get typically, I guess it really depends on your nails and your hands and everything, but I think most players, we get a little brighter sound playing PIM than they would playing PMA. So when I play that resolution, I want that sense of tension and leaning on the dissonance and then the resolution. I use color to do that a little bit. In 31, I'm brighter and louder. And then in 32, I want a softer, mellower sound. We don't want this. Now, you could argue though, you could say, well, yeah, you do want that. You want the G to be big because that's really the 5 of the key. And so the intensity should follow through all the way through. And then that gives us a real strong resolution on measure 33, where the return of the thematic material and the return of the tonic is happening. So those are some ideas. Do with them what you will. Some thoughts though. So 31 to 32, we've got a 5 of 5, then we have just a G major triad, a 5, and then so, mi, do, so, mi, do, ti, da. Now I love that dissonance because not only is it's a major 7th, it's this very beautiful dissonant sound, but it has it's like a delayed resolution to the F, right? If we talk about appoggiaturas and suspensions, the opposite of that is sometimes called a retardation. The harmony retards or is retarded and then it's brought up. You could look that up on Wiki or online to learn more about it, but it's kind of like an upside down suspension, or a suspension that resolves up. This one's even interrupted though. So instead of just E resolving to F, we have a sense of now. I think a lot of players though would split that into a sense of 3 voices. Just like in the previous measure, we let the notes overlap a little bit. It sounds like 3 voices, or maybe even 4. Then if you let the E overlap over the A in measure 38, so you could say that it's like, a lazy way of writing 3 voices by just doing that. Or you could interpret it very literally, the durations. You could play E, A, F, your call. In measures 39 and 40, it's clearly a sense of a dominant harmony. There are two non-chord tones. Interestingly, one is C natural and one is C sharp. In fact, we saw this in a previous etude, but in measure 39, you really could say that this is a G major triad, moving to the one chord in second inversion, moving back to the one chord, so that the C in measure 39 is not a chord tone, it's part of a change in harmony. It would be the root of a C chord in first inversion. First inversion is G, C, E. So we have G, B, D, root position 5 chord, then right on beat 3 of measure 39, we've got G, C, E, that's second inversion C major. Measure 40 is just a G major triad, but he has a little lower neighbor tone, a little chromatic tone. So he's just flirting a little bit with the fifth of the chord. Almost ragtimey. Then 41, same material, C major, G7, now C major arpeggio, D minor with a passing tone between the root and the flat third, root flat third, maybe give a little lean on the E. Now G7. So one thing you'll see a lot in tonal harmony is look at the second to last event in this piece. So we're right before the last C chord is struck. We have a sustained G bass, but then we have a tritone from F to B, tritone meaning 3 whole steps. The devil in music, right? That's what they used to call it. This tritone often is resolving in contrary, outward, to the root and the third of the tonic chord. So here's measure 46. Fa, mi, and ti, do. So and that gives us a strong resolution coming home. Okay, well, in this study, I think there's not a lot of new information, but we did see some new ways that non-chord tones, non-harmonic tones can be used. We saw the use of that chromatic neighbor, like in measure 40. Basically, it's a G major triad, but that C sharp, it's not really establishing a new harmony necessarily. It's just embellishing the fifth of the G major chord. And we saw a lot of upper, lower neighbors and passing tones. A good example of a passing tone kind of dissonance would be in measure 46, where we've got a D minor chord with the 2/3, right? The doubled third, flat 3, but the E, passing motion. And again, I was letting this one overlap more, it depends. My advice is to try both ways and see what you think. If it makes sense to you in the style and the way that the harmony is working, to let the sounds overlap, let it be resonant. Sometimes that's where the beauty is found. And you can kind of rob the piece of that resonant and harmonic beauty by being too strict in your interpretation of the notation. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about what works and how you're addressing it. Well, that is Opus 44 number 5. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Sor Mind, and please subscribe and enjoy your playing. There'll be more of these to come. Thanks.